was 20, driving my beat-up 1998 Honda Civic from Idaho to what I hoped would be a new life in Los Angeles. To save money on gas and avoid traffic, I decided to take the scenic route, cutting through Nevada on US Route 93. It's a stretch of road so desolate they call it the loneliest road in America. For hours, I saw nothing but endless sagebrush, distant hazy mountains, and a shimmering black ribbon of asphalt stretching to the horizon. There were no other cars, no buildings, no signs of life. It was late afternoon, the sun a brutal white disk in the sky, when my car started making a terrible noise. The temperature gauge shot into the red, and a plume of steam erupted from under the hood. I cursed, coasting the dead car to the side of the road. I was stranded. My phone, predictably, had no signal. The silence when I killed the engine was absolute and deafening. The heat was like a physical weight pressing down on me. I knew enough not to run the AC with an overheated engine, but I also knew I couldn't stay in the car, which was quickly turning into an oven. I popped the hood, the wave of heat making me stagger back, and resigned myself to waiting for the engine to cool down, or for the miracle of another car to appear. I sat on the dusty shoulder of the road, nursing my last bottle of water, watching the sun begin its slow, merciless descent. An hour passed. Nothing. The landscape was painted in the oranges and purples of sunset, and the heat of the day was beginning to be replaced by a surprising desert chill. That's when I saw him. He wasn't walking on the road, but out of the desert itself, from the east. He was just a silhouette at first, but what struck me immediately was his gait. It was a long, loping stride, almost like a slow-motion run, and he covered ground unnervingly fast. As he got closer, I stood up, my heart a strange mix of relief and anxiety. He was incredibly tall and thin, dressed in old, dusty clothes that looked like they were from the 1950s. Dark trousers, a button-up shirt, and suspenders. But his face is what I can never forget. He was grinning. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a wide, impossibly broad grin that stretched his mouth from ear to ear, showing too many teeth. It was a fixed, painted-on expression that didn't reach his eyes, which were dark, wide, and completely devoid of emotion. "Got some trouble there, friend?" he asked, his voice a strange, high-pitched drawl that didn't fit his appearance. He had stopped about 20 feet away from me. "Yeah, my car overheated. I'm just waiting for it to cool down, or for someone to drive by." His grin didn't falter. "Oh, no one's coming by, not tonight. The road washes out about 20 miles south of here. Washed out yesterday. No one told you?" A cold dread trickled down my spine. The road was my only way out. "No, I didn't see any signs." "Signs fall down," he said, taking a step closer. The grin never wavered. "But you're in luck. I can help. There's a place not far from here. Just a short walk." He gestured with a long, pale hand back into the pitch-black desert he had just emerged from. "A place? Out there?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "What kind of place?" "A good place. A quiet place," he said, his eyes seeming to glitter in the twilight. "Lots of folks there. Lots of folks with car trouble, just like you." Every instinct in my body was screaming. I looked at his face, at that horrible plastered-on smile, and I knew that if I went with him, I would never be seen again. I thought about the people who go missing in the desert, their cars found abandoned on the side of the road. "You know, I think I hear a car coming now. I'll just wait here. Thanks for the offer, though." The man's grin seemed to widen, if that was even possible. The skin on his face looked tight and dry like old parchment. He cocked his head to the side, still smiling. "No car comin', friend," he whispered, the drawl gone, replaced by a dry, rasping sound. Just us. He took another long, loping step towards me. I didn't think. I scrambled back into my car, locked the doors, and fumbled with the keys in the ignition, praying. I turned the key, the engine sputtered, groaned, and then, by some divine miracle, it turned over. I slammed the car into drive and stomped on the gas, not caring if I blew the engine for good. The car lurched forward. I glanced in my rearview mirror. The tall man was standing in the middle of the road, bathed in my red taillights. He was no longer grinning. His face was a blank, emotionless mask, and he just stood there watching me until he was a tiny speck in the darkness. I drove for 2 hours, my engine screaming, before I finally saw the lights of another town. The road wasn't washed out.
I'm an amateur archaeologist and a seasoned hiker. For years, I'd been fascinated by the ancient petroglyphs of the American Southwest. A friend who worked for the Bureau of Land Management told me about a remote, unofficially documented rock art site deep in the Mojave Desert, far from any marked trails. He gave me a rough map, drawn on a napkin, and warned me to be careful. I set out on a cool October morning, feeling adventurous. The hike was arduous, taking me through winding canyons and over rocky mesas. By late afternoon, I realized the sun was getting low and my friend's napkin map was hopelessly vague. I was lost. Panic began to set in, a cold counterpoint to the desert's residual heat. I decided to climb a small butte to get my bearings. From the top, I saw it, a narrow, shadowed canyon I hadn't noticed before. Believing it might be the place I was looking for, I scrambled down towards it. The canyon was silent and cool. The rock walls were a deep, burnt orange, and they were covered in petroglyphs. But as I walked deeper, a sense of profound unease washed over me. These were not like the familiar images of bighorn sheep and sun spirals. These carvings depicted tall, stick-like figures, but their limbs were long and spindly, with elbows and knees that bent in the wrong direction. Their heads were small and featureless, and they all seemed to be gathered in groups, staring out from the rock face. The sun disappeared below the canyon rim, plunging me into a deep twilight. I knew I had to make camp. I found a small alcove, built a tiny fire, and tried to fight off the growing dread. The firelight made the carved figures on the rocks seem to dance and flicker. I felt their unseen eyes on me. I told myself it was just exhaustion in my imagination. I eventually dozed off, only to be jolted awake a few hours later by a complete and total silence. My fire had burned down to embers, and the desert, which usually hums with the sound of insects and nocturnal creatures, was dead quiet. That's when I noticed it. One of the stick-like figures, one that I had specifically noted was carved near the canyon entrance, was now on the rock wall directly across from my alcove. I stared at it, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was impossible. It was a carving in solid rock. I must have been mistaken about its original position. I shone my flashlight around the canyon, my hand shaking so badly the beam jittered. I took a mental snapshot of the positions of several other carvings. A group of 3 on a large boulder to my left, a single one high up on the cliff to my right. I squeezed my eyes shut for a count of 10, praying I was hallucinating. When I opened them, the single figure high on the cliff was gone. I frantically swung my flashlight beam to the boulder on my left. There were now 4 figures carved there instead of 3. The missing one had joined the group. A choked scream escaped my lips. They were moving. The rock carvings were physically changing their locations on the canyon walls when I wasn't looking at them. They weren't hunting me. They were hurting me. The figures were slowly closing in on my position, appearing on rocks nearer and nearer to my small camp, their silent, carved forms tightening a net around me. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the rock, my flashlight beam constantly sweeping the walls, catching them in place. I felt like a character in a nightmare version of a children's game of red light, green light. As long as the light was on them, they were just rock. But I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that in the darkness they were moving. The moment the first hint of dawn appeared, I ran. I didn't look at my map. I just picked a direction and scrambled out of that cursed canyon, not daring to look back at the walls. I ran until the sun was high in the sky, and by some miracle I stumbled upon a marked trail. I have never told anyone the full story. How can you tell someone that you were hunted by drawings on a rock? But I know what I saw. I had stumbled into a place that wasn't meant for the living, a place where even the stones have a predatory hunger.
My boyfriend, Ben, and I were a bit reckless in our 20s. We were photographers and loved capturing stark, empty landscapes. We decided it would be an incredible experience to camp on the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah. We knew it was technically illegal and probably unsafe, but the idea of sleeping under a sky full of stars on a perfectly flat, white plain that stretched for miles was too tempting to resist. We drove our Jeep far out onto the flats one afternoon until the road was a distant memory. The place felt like another planet. The sun beat down and the ground was a blinding white crust of salt. In the distance, the heat created shimmering mirages that looked like pools of water. During the day, we noticed one particular shimmer on the horizon that was different from the others. It was darker, more substantial, and it didn't seem to move or dissipate, even as the sun began to set. We figured it was just an optical illusion, maybe a distant mountain being distorted by the heat. As night fell, the temperature plummeted. The sky was breathtaking, a brilliant canopy of stars so clear it felt like you could reach out and touch them. The silence was absolute. We sat by our small campfire, feeling like the only two people in the universe. Around midnight, we heard a sound. It was a faint, dry, scraping noise. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from, as the sound seemed to travel forever across the open flats. We turned off our lantern and listened intently. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. It was a rhythmic sound, like something heavy and rough being dragged across the salt crust. And it was getting closer. Ben grabbed our high-powered binoculars and scanned the moonlit horizon. "I see something," he whispered, his voice tight. "Out where that weird mirage was. I can't make it out. It's all wavy." I took a look. He was right. In the distance, I could see a distorted, wavering shape. It was low to the ground and seemed to be moving with a strange, lurching gait. It was a dark shape on a white landscape, and it was headed directly for our camp. The scraping sound was its movement. Panic set in. We were miles from the road, completely exposed on a flat plain with absolutely nowhere to hide. We were a single point of light and warmth in a vast, empty world, and something was coming for us. We quickly started throwing our gear into the Jeep. The scraping sound was noticeably louder now, closer. It had a wet, heavy quality to it that it didn't have before. As I threw our sleeping bags in the back, I risked one last look through the binoculars. The shape was much closer now, maybe a quarter mile away, and I could see what it was. It wasn't one thing. It looked like a man crawling on all fours, but his body was horribly contorted, his limbs moving at unnatural angles. And he wasn't just crawling. He was dragging something behind him, a large, dark, lumpy sack that left a shallow trench in the salt. I didn't need to see any more. I screamed at Ben to get in the Jeep. We jumped in and sped away, our headlights cutting a frantic path across the flats. I looked back. The figure had stopped crawling and was now standing, though it was hunched over, a tall, spindly silhouette against the starlight. It didn't chase us. It just stood there, watching us flee. We drove all night until we reached Salt Lake City. We never spoke of what we saw. There is no logical explanation for a man crawling across the salt flats in the middle of the night, dragging a heavy sack. But the thought that still gives me nightmares is the realization that if we hadn't heard that faint scraping sound on the wind,
We never would have known it was coming for us until it was right outside our tent.